"If you touch her again," the man at table 9 said, his voice barely above a whisper, "they will never find your hands." Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The entire restaurant stopped functioning. Forks suspended mid-air. Conversation severed at the root. Even the kitchen noise behind the swing doors cutting out as if someone back there had heard something and decided silence was the only appropriate response. Marcus stood in the middle of the floor with his chest heaving and his right foot still slightly raised from where he had just kicked Zara's ankle. Hard enough to send her crashing into a tray of drinks. Hard enough that she felt the impact travel up her leg and explode behind her knee. Hard enough that she knew without looking there would be a bruise by morning. Dark, deliberate, the kind that photographs well. She had not made a sound. She had learned a long time ago that sounds gave Marcus power. So she had taken the impact in silence, grabbed the edge of the service station, stopped herself from going completely down, and stood there in a wet uniform with broken glass at her feet and 30 pairs of eyes burning into her skin. Marcus turned toward the voice. The man at table 9 had not stood up, had not raised his voice, had not put down his whiskey glass, which he still held loosely between two fingers like a man with nowhere better to be and nothing left to prove. He was looking at Marcus the way you look at something temporary. A cloud. A problem that has already been solved but hasn't received the information yet. He was lean and angular, somewhere in his early 30s, with a face that might have been called beautiful if it weren't so completely, unnervingly still. His suit was dark and fitted without being flashy, and running from the base of his jaw up toward his cheekbone, curling to a stop just below his ear, was a tattoo. A black dragon mid-flight, scales drawn with the patience of someone who understood that detail was its own kind of power. On the back of the hand holding the whiskey glass, another tattoo, a single crane, wings fully spread, caught in the moment just before flight. The two men sitting with him had not moved, but something behind their eyes had switched on. Marcus opened his mouth. She's my girlfriend," he said. "She is your waitress." The man at table 9 said, "You are a guest. Guests who cannot behave are asked to leave." He set his glass down. The sound it made against the table was almost nothing. It landed like everything. "See the man out," he said, to no one in particular, or perhaps to the room itself. Two figures materialized from position Zara hadn't registered. Large, unhurried, moving toward Marcus with the efficiency of people who had done this so many times it had stopped requiring thought. Marcus looked at them, looked back at table 9, did the math. He left without another word. The restaurant exhaled. Zara stood beside the overturned tray, uniform, soaked, ankle screaming quietly, face burning with a humiliation she had not chosen and could not put down. She kept her eyes on the floor. She was shaking. Not only from pain, but from the specific trembling of a body that has held something for too long and decided without asking that it is finished. She crouched to pick up the broken glass. Leave it. A gentle hand on her arm, one of the kitchen staff crouching beside her, waving her away. Her manager, Mr. Cho, appeared from behind the host stand, looked once toward table 9, a glance that lasted less than a second but contained something she couldn't name, then turned to her. "Go to the back. Rest, please." She nodded. She walked. She made it to the staff room, sat down on the wooden bench between the lockers, and pressed a folded napkin against her mouth. She did not cry. She was 26 years old, and she had cried over Marcus Akimpong exactly 4 times in her life, and she had promised herself on the night, 4 months ago, when she bought her one-way ticket from Abidjan to Seoul, that those 4 times were the last. She breathed. She counted to 10 in French, the language her body thought in when it was frightened. Then, despite everything, she thought about the crane tattoo. Wings spread. The moment just before flight. She pushed the thought away and went to wash her face. If this story already has its hands around your throat, you are not alone. Hit subscribe and the notification bell right now, because what is coming next makes this opening look like a quiet afternoon. She had met Marcus when she was 22 and still terrible at reading the difference between passionate and volatile. He was Ghanaian British, charming the way certain weather is charming. You never saw the storm because the sky had been so perfectly blue just moments before. 2 years together, the last 6 months she had spent making herself smaller, quieter, less visible, until the woman looking back from mirrors was someone she didn't particularly recognize or like. She had left without telling him where she was going. Seoul had been the answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask yet. Working holiday visa. This job at Cafe Hangang, upscale, river adjacent, the kind of place that served food so precise it sometimes felt wrong to eat it. She had spent 4 months building a new version of herself one shift at a time. Made a friend in Soo-yeon, the hostess. Bought plants for her small apartment in Mapogu because buying plants felt like proof she intended to stay somewhere long enough to keep something alive. Then Marcus walked through the front door 2 weeks ago. She hadn't told him where she was going. He had found her anyway. That was the particular thing about Marcus. He was very good at finding things he had decided belonged to him. Mr. Cho sent her home in a car she hadn't asked for. A black car, silent and sleek, waiting at the back entrance when she came out. The driver said only, "Miss Zara?" and held the door with the patience of someone paid generously to wait without explanation. She got in because her ankle hurt and because she was tired and because some decisions arrive prearranged and stepping around them costs more than you have. She did not ask who sent the car. She thought about it for the entire drive home. The next morning, Soo-yeon told her his name in a whisper, even though they were alone. Ryu Hyun-soo said it the way you say something simultaneously important and dangerous, leaning in, voice low, eyes doing the work of punctuation. He came every Tuesday. Table 9, same whiskey. He owned the building the restaurant was in, several buildings on the street, actually. He's a businessman, Zara said. Soo-yeon looked at her with patient, fond exasperation. The men who sit with him, she said carefully. Their tattoos, here, she touched below her own ear, and here, her collarbone. Those marks mean something very specific in this city. They mean that when Mr. Ryu says see the man out, the man is in a car heading to the highway within 6 minutes. How do you know it was 6 minutes? Zara asked. Soo-yeon held her gaze. Because I watched the clock, she said simply. Be careful, Zara. Zara nodded, put on her apron, went to set the tables and told herself careful was exactly what she intended to be. The following Tuesday, the restaurant did something she had noticed before but never understood. A slight recalibration as he walked in. A collective adjustment, subtle, like a room full of people remembering something important simultaneously. He sat at table 9 at 7:30 exactly. She took a breath and walked over. Good evening, she said in Korean. She always led with Korean. It changed the way people looked at her. Sabawani Sneth, from someone they expected nothing of to someone who had made an effort. An effort in this city was its own currency. He looked up. Up close, he was younger than she'd registered from across the room. The dragon tattoo curved from his collar to just below his cheekbone, and she could see now what she couldn't see from a distance, that the dragon's mouth was open, one small flame curling toward his ear, frozen mid-breath. On his hand, the crane's wings shifted as his fingers moved. Your ankle, he said. His English was precise, accented, the English of someone who had learned it from books and then practiced until it bent to his will. How is it? She had prepared for something formal, something she could answer and step away from. Fine, she said. Thank you. It was wrong, he said. What he did. Yes. He looked at her in a way she couldn't categorize. Not the way Marcus looked at her, all demand and ownership, but like someone trying to solve something they hadn't expected to find interesting. Sit down, he said. I'm working. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, the architectural suggestion of one. Then, stand, he said, and have a conversation with a customer. That is also work. They talked. He asked how long she'd been in Seoul. 4 months. How did she find the city? Easier to navigate than expected. Harder to sleep inside. Something about the quality of the nighttime noise, she told him. The way the city kept a particular frequency even at 3 in the morning, like it was always in the middle of deciding something. He found this specific detail interesting in a way she couldn't interpret and filed away. She excused herself after 4 minutes. The tip he left under the glass was generous in a way that felt considered rather than performative. Not the tip of a man trying to impress her. The tip of a man who understood precise value and acted accordingly. She held the bills, tucked them away, went home on the subway and told herself nothing was happening. The following Tuesday, he was already at table 9 when she arrived for her shift. She felt it before she saw it. That atmospheric shift the room made. She walked to his table. He ordered his whiskey. Then he looked up at her and said, completely without preamble, The man who hurt you. Has he come back? She went very still. No, she said carefully. Why? Because if he does, Hyun-soo said, you will tell Mr. Cho immediately. He paused. Or you will tell me. She looked at him for a long moment. Why would I tell you? Because Mr. Cho will call the police, he said. And the police will take 20 minutes. He picked up his whiskey glass. I will take 2. She walked away from that table with her heart doing something complicated in her chest and told herself very firmly that it was adrenaline, just adrenaline, entirely physiological and therefore meaningless. She repeated this on the subway home. She was not entirely convinced. 4 minutes became 8, became 20. He asked about Ivory Coast, not performatively, not to demonstrate his own open-mindedness, specifically like a man who had read something and found it insufficient and was consulting the primary source. She told him about Abidjan, the 2 speeds the city moved at simultaneously, the Atlantic and how it smelled different from the Han River. Her mother who sold fabric in the market and had opinions about everything in the universe and had cried when Zara left but had still stayed up all night helping her pack. He listened the way most people never learn to. She asked what he did. Business? What kind? The kind that kept him busy. She looked at the dragon frozen mid-breath on his jaw and the crane about to lift from his hand and decided that was sufficient for now. One Tuesday in November, it rained seriously. The Seoul variety that commits completely, as if the sky has made a decision and will not be reasoned with. She arrived damp and irritable. He was already at table 9 and looked up when she appeared, and something in his expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, at the sight of her wet hair, her soaked collar. You walked from the station, he said, not a question. I always walk from the station. He said nothing. He ordered his whiskey. She moved away and served other tables and told herself the look on his face had meant nothing, because she was not in the business of reading meanings into the faces of complicated men. The black car was waiting at the curb when her shift ended, rain hammering the roof of it, warm light through the tinted windows. Soo-yeon appeared at her shoulder. He left 30 minutes ago, she said quietly. Zara looked at the car, at the rain turning the street into a mirror. At the car again. She got in. She told herself it was just a car. She was not sure she believed this anymore. She was also not sure she minded not believing it. 3 Tuesdays later, he asked her to dinner. Somewhere small, not famous, good lighting. Dumplings that were worth the trip. She said yes before she had finished deciding to. They ate for 3 hours, and then something happened that she hadn't anticipated. She lost track of time. She, who always knew exactly what time it was, who had trained herself over years with Marcus to track time the way you track weather when you live somewhere dangerous, completely lost track of it. She noticed at some point that it was past midnight and felt, for the first time in longer than she could calculate, not the slightest impulse to leave. He told her about Busan, about his grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died, who had been an artist before she was a grandmother, who had a way of looking at things he had spent his whole life trying to replicate and never quite managed. He said this without self-pity, as a simple statement of fact, which was somehow more affecting than grief would have been. She told him about her mother, about leaving, about the specific loneliness of building a life in a language that isn't yours, and the specific pride when the language starts becoming yours. Anyway, he said he had not had a conversation like this in longer than he could calculate. She heard the unpracticed quality in it. Not performed honesty, but genuine unfamiliarity with the act of saying true things out loud, and believed him completely. They were leaving when it happened, standing outside on the pavement, the neighborhood quiet around them, and she was mid-sentence about something she could not afterward remember when he kissed her. Decided, unhurried, the kiss of a man who had been deciding not to for a long time, and had simply run out of reasons to keep deciding not to. She kissed him back, and then she heard it. Footsteps, a figure crossing the street 30 meters away, stopping, looking in their direction. For one crashing second she thought Marcus. Her whole body went cold, and then the figure moved on. Just a stranger, just someone passing through, and the cold receded. But it had been there. She pulled back slightly, looked up at Hyun-soo. He had seen it too. Her reaction, the way her body had prepared itself. Something moved through his expression that was not quite anger and not quite grief, but somewhere between them. He's still in the city, Hyun-soo said, not a question. Yes, she said, he'll come back. He always does. Silence. Then, not this time, he said. With a quietness that was different from his usual quietness, heavier, more decided. She looked at him carefully. What does that mean? It means, he said, that there are ways of solving problems that do not require your involvement or your knowledge. Hyun-soo. She said his name the way her mother said things, full weight, no softening. If you do something, I need to know. I will not be the wife of a man who does things I'm not allowed to know about. The word landed between them. Wife. She hadn't planned it. She felt the air change. He looked at her for a long moment. Is that what you want? He said carefully. To be my wife? The question should have frightened her. The speed of it should have frightened her. She stood on that quiet pavement with the Han River somewhere in the dark, behind the buildings and the ghost of a stranger's footsteps still on the street, and she took a breath and found, to her own complete unsurprise, that she was not frightened at all. Ask me properly, she said. The corner of his mouth moved, the almost smile. I don't do things improperly, he said. Give me a week. He gave her 4 days. A Thursday evening, his apartment. She'd been there twice now. High floor, Han River through every window, spare and precise, the apartment of a man who had never expected to accumulate things. He cooked. She hadn't expected that. She sat at his kitchen counter and watched him cook with the focused efficiency he brought to everything, and thought that domesticity looked surprisingly natural on a man with a dragon on his jaw. After dinner, he put on the table a small box she hadn't seen him, retrieved from anywhere. Inside it, a ring. Thin white gold, understated, a single stone the color of deep water. His grandmother's, he told her, the artist from Busan. Ryu Hyun-soo, she said slowly. You are a complicated man from a complicated world, and I do not fully understand everything you are yet. No, he agreed, not yet. But I will, she said. I am going to understand all of it eventually. I want that to be clear before I answer. It's clear, he said. Then yes, she said. Obviously, yes. He put the ring on her hand, the crane tattoo pressed against her knuckles. She looked at the ring and then at the tattoo, and then at his face, and found that the thing she had felt locking into place in her chest the night they first really talked had locked a little further, more completely, with a finality that felt like relief rather than fear. She called her mother that night. Her mother was silent for a long time. Then, describe his face. Zara described it. Does he look at you properly? She thought about every Tuesday evening and every rainy car and every okay that meant everything else. Yes, she said. He looks at me properly. Her mother cried. The good kind. They married on a Tuesday morning at the district office. It felt appropriate. She found out she was pregnant 5 weeks later. She sat on the bathroom floor of their apartment, her plants on his windowsills now, the word there still assembling itself in the air between them, and held the test in both hands and felt a life rearranging itself beneath her without asking permission first. She was still on the floor when she heard his key in the front door. She stood, she walked to the bedroom doorway. He looked up from the entrance hall and read her face immediately. He had always been better at this than she was comfortable with, and crossed the room in 4 steps before she could say anything. She held up the test. The stillness broke. 3 seconds. Exactly. 3. Something cracked open in his expression, raw and completely unguarded, nothing like anything she had seen from him before. Then it resettled. Warmer, different. He took the test from her hand and looked at it and looked at her. Are you scared? She said. Fine. I don't know what I am. He set the test carefully on the nightstand, took both her hands, the crane pressed against her knuckles. Okay, he said. That word. The word that meant I have you. We will find the rest of the language later. She leaned her forehead against his chest and felt him breathe and told herself she would ask the questions tomorrow. Tomorrow came 3 days later in the form of a phone call she was not supposed to hear. She had come home early. Mr. Cho worried about her being on her feet too long. Hyun-soo hadn't heard her come in. He was in the study, door almost closed, speaking Korean rapid enough and low enough that 4 months ago she would have caught nothing but scattered syllables. But she had been learning every day, quietly, relentlessly. She had been learning because language was the architecture of a life, and she was living inside one she didn't fully speak yet, and this had always bothered her more than she had let on. She caught enough now, enough to understand the person on the other end was reporting to him. Enough to understand that territories and payment and consequences and make him disappear were not the vocabulary of a man who simply owned several buildings near a river. Enough to understand that when he said handle it in the voice she had heard only once before, in a restaurant telling two men to see someone out, it meant something precise and permanent. Make him disappear. She stood in the hallway. Her hand went to her stomach, still flat, still secret from everyone except the two of them and the test on the nightstand. She went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, stood looking at her plants on his windowsill. Her plants, his windowsill, theirs, all of it theirs, and felt the drawer she had been keeping things in swing fully open, everything sliding out onto the floor at once, and understood with complete clarity that she was going to have to deal with every single thing in it. When he appeared in the kitchen doorway 20 minutes later, she had 2 cups of tea on the table. "Sit down," she said. He sat. He looked at the 2 cups. He went very still. "Tell me," she said. "Not everything. Not tonight, but enough. We have a child coming, Hyun-soo. I need to know what world I've brought them into. I need to know who I've married. Not the version you show in restaurants, the full version." He was quiet for a long time. Not evasion. She knew the texture of his evasions by now. This was something else entirely. A man deciding how to speak a truth he had been carrying alone for so long he had forgotten what it felt like not to. He told her, slowly, Busan first, what he had first. Been born into what the organization was before it was his. What it meant to inherit something like that without being asked whether you wanted it. The tattoos, the dragon for blood, for belonging, for a version of himself that had formed before he had any say in the matter. The crane for his grandmother, for the version he had been choosing, slowly, for years, to become instead. The men with marks on their necks, and what those marks meant in the architecture of this city's underground. What he controlled and what controlling it cost, and what happened to people who forgot he controlled it. He told her that make him disappear on the phone had meant relocating a business rival's operations to a city 3 hours away. Nothing permanent, this time. She absorbed that. This time. "The crane and the dragon," she said. "Which one leads?" He looked at her. "They are not separate versions," he said carefully. "They are the same person." "I know," she said. "That's exactly what I'm asking. Which one leads, in this house, with our child, with me?" Silence. The longest she had experienced with him. Then, "The crane," he said. "With you. The crane leads." She pressed her hand over his on the table, the crane tattoo under her palm. Wings spread. "Then I'm staying," she said, "but honesty is not a request anymore. It is a requirement, every time. Do you understand me?" "Yes," he said. "Good." She picked up her tea. "Now tell me the rest." They talked until 2 in the morning. She asked questions he answered. Some she accepted. Some she pushed back on, and he received her pushback with the quiet of a man who had not expected it and found it. She could see this clearly in his face. Something close to relief. She understood, sitting across from him in their kitchen at 2 in the morning, that she was the only person in his world who spoke to him as a complete equal, without deference, without calibrated respect, just directly as one person to another, which was something he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting. "Okay," he said when they had finished, 3rd time, still the word that meant everything else. She was 8 weeks pregnant when Marcus found her again. She had been careful. Address private, movements varied. All the precautions a careful woman takes when managing a man who has decided she belongs to him. But Marcus had patience the way obsession makes people patient. Not because they have self-control, but because the thing they want gives them access to an endurance they possess for nothing else. She was coming back from a grocery run on a Thursday evening. Heavy bags, tired ankles, thinking about what she was going to eat, and in what order, when she heard his voice directly behind her. "Nice building." She turned slowly. He was 6 feet away, hands in pockets, and he looked different from the last time. Something around his eyes had solidified into the look of a man who had made a decision and was now operating from inside it. "I know who your husband is," he said, carefully, like placing a card on a table he believed he owned. She kept her face still. Ryu Hyun-soo. He had practiced the pronunciation. She could hear the rehearsal in it. I know what he is, what his organization does. That's interesting information, the kind that could be very useful, not to journalists, to authorities, to people who compete with him. He tilted his head. Useful to me. He thought this made him powerful. She could see the belief sitting on him like a costume. A man who had found a weapon and had not yet understood that the weapon was already pointed in the wrong direction. What Marcus did not know, what he could not know because he had been too busy following her to pay attention to the building he was standing in front of, was that there was a man in a black car 30 meters up the street who had been sitting there since 7:15 and whose job specifically was to notice things that didn't belong. She had not known this either until 2 weeks ago. Now she knew. And standing here with her grocery bags and her 8-week secret and Marcus in front of her, looking like a man who believed he had finally won something, she felt, with startling clarity, not fear but something close to sadness, because she had once loved this person, or a version of this person, and that version, whatever had become of it, was very far from what was standing in front of her now. Marcus, she said, her voice completely steady. I want you to listen to me carefully because I will say this exactly once. Zara. You have found information you believe is leverage, she said. You are standing in front of a building that is watched. You have made yourself visible as a threat with a face and a location. She shifted her bags to one hand. In the world my husband operates in, problems with faces and locations do not remain problems for long. You being here right now, saying what you just said in front of this building, that is not leverage. That is a decision. And decisions like that have consequences that I will not be able to stop once they are in motion. She looked at him directly. Do you understand what I am telling you? Marcus stared at her. The card on the table was starting to look like the wrong card. I am not threatening you, she said, quieter now. I am telling you the truth because I once knew you, and somewhere inside what you have become, there is still a person capable of a different kind of life. That person needs to make a decision right now. Get on a plane. Build something for yourself. Something that isn't built on what other people have. I am telling you this not because I owe you anything. I owe you nothing. But because a child is coming into this world, and I would prefer that child not grow up knowing what happened to her mother's ex-boyfriend outside their building on a Thursday evening. She picked up her bags with both hands. 60 seconds, she said. Choose. She walked into the building. She made it to the elevator before her legs started shaking. She pressed their floor and breathed through her nose and counted in French, the language her body thought in when it was frightened, and did not allow herself to come apart in an elevator because she never had, and today was not the day. She told Hyun-soo that evening because honesty was a requirement now, not a request. She watched his face as she spoke, watched it do the 3-second thing, something cold and decided rising behind the stillness like a tide coming in. She put her hand on his arm before the tide could fully arrive. He's frightened, she said. Stupid and frightened. Don't make it permanent. He looked at her hand on his arm, at her face, at the hand again. He hurt you, he said. And now I'm here, she said. With you, our child. My plant's on your windowsill. He didn't win, Hyun-soo. There is nothing left for him to take. Don't give him the power of becoming the reason you choose the dragon tonight instead of the crane. The longest silence. The tide went back, not completely, wise. She could see it at the edges of him, present, contained, a thing that lived in him and would always live in him. But back. He leaves Seoul tonight, Hyun-soo said. That's enough, she said. His passport will be flagged at every major airport in Southeast Asia for the next 5 years, he said. That is non-negotiable. She considered this. Acceptable, she said. Marcus was on a flight to London by 11:15. Soo-yeon texted her at midnight. A single crane emoji, then a dragon emoji, then, "Don't ask me anything." Zara laughed. She sat in the kitchen in the dark with her hand on her stomach and her plants on the windowsill and thought about what her mother had asked. Does he look at you properly? She thought about every version of that question she had lived through in the past 8 months. Table 9 in the restaurant that held its breath. A black car on a rainy night, then stand and have a conversation. A ring from a grandmother in Busan. Okay, every time. the word that held everything else inside it. Yes, she thought. He looks at me properly. She was 12 weeks along when Soo-yeon gathered a small group at the restaurant after closing. Warm, discreet, a table of people who had watched this thing unfold from their particular vantage points and felt, in the way of witnesses to something improbable, a proprietary tenderness toward it. Mr. Cho brought expensive dumplings from somewhere and gave a toast in Korean that Zara mostly followed now. Hyun-soo sat beside her and filled in the parts she missed in her ear, his voice low and warm, the crane tattoo resting against her hand where their fingers were intertwined on the table. She looked around the room. Soo-yeon, who had said be careful on the first morning and meant don't get hurt and had stayed beside her through all of it regardless. Mr. Cho, who had sent her home in a car on the worst night and never once mentioned it again. The kitchen staff who had crouched beside her with a folded napkin and waved her away from broken glass on the floor. And the man beside her, who was telling Soo-yeon something she was only half following, his hands moving slightly as he talked. The crane tattoo shifting with the movement, wings spread, always in that moment just before flight. She had been looking at that tattoo for 8 months, and she had always read it as departure, a bird in the act of leaving. She had lived with leaving for so long, had left Abidjan, had left Marcus, had left versions of herself she had outgrown, that she had built departure into the way she read everything, even wings. She looked at it now in the warm light of a restaurant that had become the place where her actual life had started, with the small new life assembling itself. Inside her and the ring from a grandmother on her hand, and she thought, maybe she had been reading it wrong. Maybe a crane with its wings spread was not a bird going anywhere. Maybe it was a bird that had just arrived. She was still thinking this when she felt Hyun-soo's hand turn under hers, his fingers finding hers properly, the crane tattoo pressing warm against her skin. And she looked up and found him looking at her, away from the conversation, just at her, in the specific way her mother had always described, the way that made you the subject rather than the decoration, the point of the sentence rather than the flourish at the end. She smiled at him. He almost smiled back. The architectural suggestion, the sketch before the painting, and then Soo-yeon's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and something changed in her face. Quick, almost imperceptible, but Zara had learned to read Soo-yeon's face the way you learn to read weather in a city you've decided to stay in. Soo-yeon looked up and met her eyes and then looked down again immediately. Zara felt it in her chest before she understood it. A shift, a change in atmospheric pressure, the particular sensation of something arriving at the edge of things that hasn't announced itself yet. "Everything okay?" she said. "Of course," Soo-yeon said. "Bright, easy. 2 beats too quick." Zara looked at Hyun-soo. He was watching Soo-yeon now with that still, assessing quality in his eyes that she knew meant he had already noticed what she had noticed and was already processing what it meant. He picked up his whiskey glass, set it down without drinking. Under the table, his hand found hers and held it. The crane pressed warm against her knuckles, but his grip was slightly tighter than usual. She felt it clearly. She did not ask again. Not tonight. Tonight was warm food and the people she had built around herself in a city she had arrived in with nothing but a suitcase and the stubborn intention to stay upright. But she filed it away. Soo-yeon's face, the 2 beats, the phone face down on the table now. In the place where she kept things she would need to come back to. She had learned, in 8 months in this city, in this world, in this life she had not planned but had chosen with her eyes open, that peace was real. That it was possible to build something stable and warm in the middle of complicated things. That love did not require simplicity to be genuine. She had also learned that in the world she now lived in, quiet was not the same as safe, and that when Soo-yeon's phone buzzed at midnight with something that changed her face, it was never nothing. Whatever was coming had not arrived yet, but it was on its way. You just watch the calm before it. And if you think you know what Soo-yeon saw on that phone, you don't. Subscribe right now and hit every notification option available to you, because the next episode starts exactly where that phone buzzes, and what comes through that door will change everything you think you know about everyone in this story. Do not find out from the comments section. Be here first.